Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Net neutrality is the principle that all legal content on internet must be equally accessible to all the users, and ISPs, that is internet service providers, must not favor, block or slow down any content on it. Now, there are concerns that telecom operators will discriminate against certain types of content for commercial purposes. This will hurt consumers and diminish online innovations. Today, to discuss the issue of net neutrality, we have with us Rishab Bailey, Director Legal, Society for Knowledge Commons. Hello Rishab, welcome to Newsclick. Rishab, what is the principle of net neutrality and why is this important?
Now, when you as a user go onto the internet, you pay your internet service provider, your telecom provider who gives you that connection, you pay him to be able to access all content on the internet. So once you are on the internet, you can essentially go from website to website, service to service without being charged extra depending on what kind of service or what kind of website you are actually going to. So basically anyone can connect to any application service or to another person or to another user online. And anyone can actually offer any legal services online. So net neutrality attempts to preserve this openness of the internet that allows everyone to connect with everyone else. Essentially, why this principle is important is that it prevents the emergence of monopolies in the context of the internet. If you have a situation where content providers, for instance, can pay a telecom operator to ensure that their content is provided to you, the user, at a preferential either rate or cheaper or so on, it's likely to lead to more and more users using that particular service at the cost of any other service, which basically means that all big content players will do very, very well, but at the cost of smaller content players. This obviously therefore acts as a barrier to entry into the market for new service providers or content providers and curtails innovation in the market. It also limits the choice that a consumer has in terms of what content he or she wants to access on the internet. Which is why it's particularly important to protect this principle, given that it also acts as an incentive for internet service providers to actually invest in increasing the capacity or the bandwidth that is available to the users generally. Unlike in the case of most other goods where, say in the case of a traditional company, if I'm producing, say, soft drinks, if I sell more soft drinks, I will make more money. If I'm producing more of the good, I will make more profit. Bandwidth, however, does not work like that. I mean, in fact, it's in the interest of the telecom company to restrict the amount of bandwidth and then charge more for that same scarce resource. So network neutrality attempts to combat this as well. So at the root of the issue of network neutrality is a question of how do you actually view the internet. I mean, do you view it as a public utility, much like, say, electricity, or do you view it as a club good, like, say, cable television? I think you're familiar with the fact that in our cable television services today, you get some channels on Tata Sky, you don't get some channels on Airtel, and you as a user have absolutely no choice about what you can decide. I want to get Tata Sky or I want to get Airtel, and within those you can choose a bouquet of channels, but you can't decide what channels Tata Sky is going to carry. This restricts your choice of content to access, and this is exactly the battle that is taking place on the internet. Do you want a telecom company to be able to say, you will only be able to use X search, X email, or access A, B, and C websites? No, you want to be able to access choice that is available on the internet as long as it's legal. That is what is at stake here when we discuss the principle of network neutrality.
Telecom services claim that the growth of internet has hampered or hindered their increment in the revenue. Now, how true is that? And if the violation of net neutrality takes place and we start prioritizing the things that these telecom services are demanding for, how do you think things are going to change, and will that compensate?
The two separate questions you've asked. Firstly, on the issue of whether communication services and applications that are on the internet, such as Skype and so on and so forth, whether they're actually eating into the revenues of your traditional telecom companies, and whether in fact that makes the business of these traditional telecom companies unviable. Now, first, you have to keep in mind that that is completely, that there's been a lot of misinformation which is being spread by the telecom industry, which obviously wants to ensure that they have multiple sources of revenue. What they do not tell you is that data revenue, or the revenue that they receive from customers who use data on the, to access the internet, is actually rising at a tremendous rate. There have been multiple studies conducted by groups like McKinsey and so on this issue, who have all forecast massive rises in data revenues for these companies. Secondly, you just have to look at the recent statements by any of these companies, whether it's Vodafone, Airtel, so on, who have in their annual reports consistently indicated massive profits are being made over the last few years. Now, if you were to actually go and look at the actual figures on the ground, you actually have an increase in number of voice users in India because we do not yet have 100% penetration of even voice services in India. So to say that voice services are being cannibalized is completely wrong, and there's absolutely no evidence to this effect. In fact, because people are being able to use services like Skype for relatively cheap, people are actually talking more on the phone than they would normally. I think you'll remember back in the day, we used to think 5 times before making an international call. We used to end it as soon as possible. But now people are actually being able to talk for longer, being able to make more calls. And this is in turn driving data revenues for these same very telecom companies who claim that they are losing out on money. So that's absolutely untrue.
Now, Airtel and Vodafone, we have just seen that they have been lobbying with TRAI. And what they're trying is to ensure licensing on communication services like Skype, WhatsApp, and other communication services. Or what they want is that every time a user uses these services, you pay them extra charges. How do you think it's going to change the things, and what's going to be the...
Well, implementing any licensing system firstly is going to be, I would think, extremely unworkable in the context of the internet. I mean, there's a plethora of online applications that allow you to do real-time communication, chat, so on and so forth. I mean, ranging from your GChat to your Facebook chat to your Facebook itself to X number of, real-time applications that allow you to communicate. So if the government of India is actually going to try and license each and every one of this, it's actually going to either result in, one, Indian customers being denied access to many of these services and applications. 2, it's going to create a high cost of entry into the market. So anyone who wants to provide a new service it's going to be far tougher for them to go through this regulatory red tape in order to get a license. At the same time, if you allow telecom companies to charge for every call that they supposedly lose on account of a call made on Skype or something, firstly, there's no evidence to say that they are direct substitutes. You are not using a Skype call and therefore directly costing a telecom company. You might never have made that call. You might be making that call because Skype is so cheap, as I just mentioned. In any event, this is likely to lead to an increase in costs for the user, which is something obviously that there's no basis for. All it will do is increase the super profits made by these telecom companies, which are already in very, very good health.
In the context of India, how do you think these licensing is going to solve the problem of privacy in communication and security?
Yeah, now TRAI in its consultation paper, which it has released on this issue, has actually spoken about how there's a need to ensure that public interest regulation is possible of these applications and services on the internet. And they've pointed to things like privacy concerns and security concerns in this context and said, and have asked whether a licensing regime can be implemented to ensure that these concerns are met. I actually don't think that a licensing system is necessary to ensure that privacy rights of citizens of India and so on can be protected. What we need are strong privacy laws, and we actually do not have very strong privacy laws at the moment. We have a privacy bill which has been pending with the government now for a few years, and we haven't really seen too much a movement on that. So our Indian laws apply to content or to applications and services that are generally accessible in India using the internet. So as such, there is no need to implement a licensing system in order to have these laws apply. The IPC will always apply. The Indian Penal Code, for instance, will always apply to even a Skype, for instance. So there's really no connection between a licensing regime and enforcing our Indian laws in the context of the internet.
Last question, Rishab. What is the legal situation in India concerning net neutrality?
Well, as we've just been discussing, we have absolutely no laws on this as of now, no regulation now. Though, of course, our competition commission, which is authorized to look at instances where there are market failures, can look at agreements which adversely affect competition in the market, and the online market is equally under their jurisdiction. In fact, I understand the Competition Commission is currently looking at certain practices that they believe fall foul of net neutrality and are therefore skewing the online market. As I mentioned, TRAI has released a consultation paper which also looks at this issue of net neutrality, and there's been a lot of late, a lot of attention by the media as well as netizens who are anxious to ensure that telcos do not actually take control of the way Indian citizens can access the internet. So there are various petitions doing the rounds online, which I would in fact urge your viewers to sign up on and maybe tweet and blog about this issue as well. But we are in a sort of critical stage at the moment, because it looks the government has taken notice of this entire debate, and it does look like we will have some form of regulation covering this issue coming up very shortly. What form exactly that regulation takes, whether it actually is sufficient to ensure citizens' rights are protected and that there is transparency in the provision of internet services, that we'll have to wait and see. And of course, that will depend to a large extent on the pressure that we as citizens can bring to bear on the government.
And a very important thing, what we have seen on internet, little startups. Facebook was started in a hostel dormitory.
Right.
Okay, WhatsApp is run only by 50 people.
Right.
And even Newsclick, how it is run. I mean, there have been so many startups. How do you think is the violation of net neutrality going to harm all these startups? No, is there, I mean, are the regulatory committees who are working on if net neutrality should be there or not, are they even focusing on such questions, how it is going to harm the booming business over internet?
You're absolutely correct that one of the things about the internet is the fact that anyone can provide a service, and the fact that you have a principle which is called permissionless innovation. That means anyone can provide a legal service. You come up with something new, you can provide it on the internet. That's what's made the internet what it is today. As you correctly mentioned, I mean, today's Facebooks, Googles and so on wouldn't exist if this principle of openness of the internet or if this principle of network neutrality was not in place. Because what it would mean is that in today's world, for instance, if Facebook or a Google pays your telecom company to ensure that you have preferential access, whether it's faster speeds or you have exemption from data caps and so on, when you're accessing their sites, no competitor, small or big, is ever actually going to be able to get any eyeballs, is going to be able to get people to view its content. So this is a huge dampener therefore on innovation, and as I mentioned, adds barriers to entry into the market. Now, this is actually something that has been taken into account by many countries across the world. So you have a lot of the South American countries, for example, Brazil, Argentina, Chile and so on, who have taken up this issue of network neutrality and have actually passed legislation to protect this principle. You also have countries like Netherlands and Slovenia which have legislation on this regard, and of course you have the United States, Canada, many other countries where you have sector-specific regulation which actually puts in place strong regulation to protect this principle, because it's been recognized the world over that protecting network neutrality is essential towards maintaining a free and a fair marketplace in the context of the internet.
That's all for today, Rishab. And TRAI has already received more than 2 lakh petitions to protect network neutrality, and we hope it is protected and internet is used in the same or a better way like it has been. We'll get back to you on such issues. Thank you for coming.